sorry, but I have to go to bed.
You're on Santos.
But we do our family thing next weekend.
Good morning and welcome to the Muscatine County Board of Supervisors meeting. Today is Monday, December 27th, 2021, and it is 9 a.m. First item on the agenda is to review the agenda.
Move to approve as presented.
So a motion by Jeff, a second by Scott. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Any opposed? Okay, moving on to item number 3. Discussion and possible action to approve the claims dated December 27th, 2021 in the amount of $351,400.97.
Second.
We have a motion by Nathan, a second by Jeff. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Any opposed? Okay, moving on to item number 4. This is a public hearing on the proposed ordinance adopting the revised Muscatine County Supervisor Districts and Election Precincts as recommended by the Muscatine County Temporary Redistricting Commission as a result of the 2020 census. I think you guys all reviewed those, looked at the maps. Any questions or no comments?
Do you guys want to go?
Anyone from the public?
I think everybody had a chance to look at the proposed maps. Have any questions, I guess would be on those.
There was some questions last week. We moved some stuff around. I think Nathan, you reviewed everything, and I think we appreciate you guys' work. A ton of work that went into that, and I know that you guys. I had sent a couple emails asking about updates, and so appreciate all that.
Yeah, everything's kind of been compressed.
Took 6
this
months'
year
work and
because-
put it into a month and a half, right?
Yeah,
Because
it
the census was late.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's, but, everybody's had a chance to look at them. I don't know if like I said, any other questions that you discussed. We can.
No, I think that
those.
if we approve all this, I think it'll make the timeline that needs to be submitted to the state. Correct?
Yeah, we'll have the two additional
Readings?
readings,
Yep.
and then we'll have, slip it under the wire for the Secretary of State's office.
Yeah, no, I think I just wanted to comment just in regards to, the work that you guys did. I know that it's nonpartisan in both sides, and I think we appreciate that and that fact of knowing that you guys were able to just go down to where I think it was just within a few people per count of every district and the precincts of how you guys determined that. I think that was just a lot of work, and we know that that's done in the best fair way that you guys did that, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, with the changes in the state legislature lines made some, changes from that we were required to make due to the changes in those lines. So that was the main portion, was just being able to match, not cross those new lines.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'd like to thank our committee members, Fred, Lynn, Nick, and Amy, Fred's here with us, and then of course our personal Wizard of Oz here, Justin, the man behind the screen that did all the computer work, and of course Tybee and her staff for that, so.
Well, this is a public hearing, so I don't know if there's anybody else from the public that would want to comment on that. If there is nothing else, we'll take it.
I'd make a motion, we close the public hearing.
Okay.
What's second?
We have a motion by Jeff, a second by Scott to close the public hearing. This is a roll call vote. Jeff?
Aye.
Nathan?
Aye.
I vote aye. Scott?
Aye.
And Doug?
Aye.
All right. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is discussion and possible action to approve the ordinance redefining the Muscatine County Supervisor Districts and Election Precincts and the Muscatine County for the first of the 3 readings on this.
Move to approve.
We have a motion by Jeff, second by Scott. Any discussion?
I'm just saying, I'm gonna be abstaining because this affects me personally, so I don't feel comfortable voting one way or the other on it.
Oh, okay.
This is all.
Affects
Affects us all though.
Yeah.
Scott,
Scott,
everybody.
you, me.
Sure,
Santos,
no.
Everybody.
Okay. All right, so then, This is a roll call vote. I need a motion. Did you make a motion,
Yeah,
Jeff?
we did. I was the motion, Scott seconded.
All right, I'm sorry. All right, so Jeff, how do you vote?
Aye.
Nathan, you're
Present.
present, abstain, okay. I vote aye. Scott
I vote aye.
and Doug?
Aye.
Okay. Moving on to item number 5. Thank you guys so much.
You open yet?
We'll be open Friday night.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Free booze on Friday?
All right, item number 5, this is a public hearing on the proposed ordinance of the revised floodplain management regulations for Muscatine County. Eric?
Yes, I believe in your package, you should have all received, the proposed ordinance language that we're presenting, as well as a copy of our existing ordinance language. There's a lot of reorganization and changes, wording, better clarification, but there's really not a lot of, additional requirements, to the public or, to us as the management entity. It just clarifies a lot of terms, updates a lot of terms. Again, just not a lot of extra restrictions at all. This is basically the minimum standard language that you must have to have a recognized floodplain management, floodplain development ordinance, to be in compliance with FEMA and the National Flood Insurance Program. We must maintain a management ordinance that meets basic criteria for our citizens to be eligible to purchase flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program. In the summary that I provided you, there was one item where I did want some input. It was on page 10, where I did present some alternate language. It really, the minimum standard for FEMA is any part of a structure that's down in the floodplain. If you picture a cabin along the river that would have the living area up above and they just have an enclosed garage space, you're probably familiar with flood venting on the walls. You're required to have at least one opening with 1 square inch for every square foot of enclosed space. That meets the minimum standards. However, National Flood Insurance Program has some recommended language that would require, excuse me, those openings to be on at least 2 separate walls, and homeowners then qualify for lower premiums. I thought it'd be worthwhile to talk about to see if we wanted to install that a little bit higher burden language that would make it where it'd be more likely that our citizens would qualify for those lower premiums. There's a lot. Right now, it would depend on your agent to to tell those people what the needs are for those premiums, and a lot of times they don't have those discussions till after the project is done, when they look at the certifications from the surveyor and the building department, what was installed and what was not. So it's just an option. We can leave it as is with 1 opening on at least 1 wall, or we could put that higher burden in there that could help people see some lower premiums.
How would that affect people who already have just a 1 wall opening?
They're not gonna get those lower premiums. They can still get the flood insurance now, if they meet the minimum. But they wouldn't be eligible for the lower premiums.
So it's not gonna take away anything from anybody right now?
No. It'd just be new development that could possibly qualify for some, and there's a lot of changes going on nationwide with the National Flood Insurance Program. They're gonna slowly raise some of the premiums, do a lot more risk assessment. Like a lot of insurance companies over the past 10, 15 years, there's been a lot of natural disasters, been a lot of payouts. They've been studying the National Flood Insurance Program, looking at things pretty hard to encourage people to have the right type of construction, and some people are gonna pay a little more, some people are gonna pay a little less. They're gonna do a lot of detailed study on the risks and flood depths and how that affects your premium. None of that affects us. We don't have anything to do with determination of premiums, but there's a push to get it more, to have the people that are in the higher risk areas to pay a little higher premium. Instead of just across the board. So that was the only area that was kind of something I wanted some input on, that we'd have to make a determination before you make a motion to.
I like it. I think that's a good, I mean, if it doesn't take anything away, as Nathan mentions, I think that it gives them opportunity for the homeowners to, if they're building, to be able to possibly capture that lower premium. I think that would be a good a good add-on or amended item on this?
The only concern I would have is if, you know, like you could foresee in this situation where it may not be possible to put opening on two side or may not be desirable, and I would hate to have it curb their ability to develop if it's just a cost issue. I don't know if we could word it as such to where it would be, you know, this is the minimum requirement, 1 inch, and then, but ideally you would do this and you may get additional relief or something like that.
Well, we do have a variance process, for any standard that's within the ordinance that someone would have a hardship meeting, there is a variance process.
Okay.
We've used it very sparingly, I think, in the 20-some years that I've been here. I think that there's been two floodplain, variances issued. It has to, because it has to not only be issued by our Board of Adjustment, but the DNR has to issue written concurrence on it as well. I'm trying to picture a case where they couldn't accomplish that, Jeff. It's really, they just block out.
Yeah.
And they can split the total square inches between two walls.
Right.
So if they needed 400 square inches, they could put 200 square inches here and 200 over here. They just put it in two different walls. But certainly there, if you put it in there as a mandatory minimum, the 2 wall requirement, and someone had a case where they could apply for a variance
Okay.
and they could still meet the minimum requirement, they just wouldn't get that.
Well, I think that's a good idea if we can highlight that there's a way that they could potentially save on flood insurance as long as it doesn't, you know, if they have a mechanism, if they still need to accomplish a project and there wasn't, you know, they wouldn't forego their ability to.
And there's provisions within the ordinance that talks about variance procedures
Okay.
and that type of stuff. There is always a mechanism to appeal minimum requirements.
So that makes sense to me to do that.
Yeah. How often do we review this permit or ordinance,
Really,
I should
we
say?
review our ordinance, at the urging of the DNR, every so many years. We needed to take a look at ours because we have to update, our flood maps are getting updated. If you recall, a couple of years ago, we had a public hearing where the firm
Yeah.
came in and presented changes to the firm maps, the insurance rate maps. Our ordinance had to reflect the new map dates, which will be effective the end of January of this year, or of 2022. And when the DNR was reviewing our ordinance, they said, hey, this looks like it hasn't been updated a long time. Here's the basic minimum language and a recommendation that we make to all counties. They're trying to get some consistency across the state for county language, and so really it's when FEMA or the DNR determines, hey, it really doesn't meet our minimum standards anymore.
But then the maps that we just did, we do those a little more often?
The maps are really, we don't ever, that is completely the National Flood Insurance Program and FEMA that updates those. I can't tell you what their catalyst is for when they decide to update those maps. I know there was some technology that they seized upon. Iowa DNR had done a statewide like LiDAR flight, and they had that data, so they thought this is a good time to look at to bring that data in to look at the flood boundaries. And so that's what kicked off a lot of the.
And do we have access to that LiDAR?
It will be part of our mapping. It will be the data, part of the data there's a lot of other engineering that goes into the flood boundary maps as well, hydraulic studies in certain areas, but yeah, I mean, if you want data, the DNR and FEMA has interactive websites now where the public, it's much, much easier. It used to be, we had to get out a big paper map to look where a floodplain boundary was on someone's property. We've brought it into our beacon, or our, not beacon, it's not available for the public, but our county information and GIS, we brought the floodplain boundary layers in. So someone comes in,
So the county engineer can look at it, he can be able to say, hey, this road that we're possibly gonna be cleaning out a ditch, we can see the elevations.
Well, even a landowner or property owner, FEMA has a map where you can go out with an address in the floodplain, it'll show
The elevation of their
It'll show you the
ground.
100-year floodplain boundaries and all of that, so it's a very good tool.
So
for
then
anybody.
when they're looking at this house, for example, then we can tell, you can identify and say, oh, this is at 539, possibly in the flood area.
well, it depends if it's in a detailed study area or not, along, populated areas around town, subdivisions, the outskirts of municipal limits. A lot of the flooding sources are a detailed study area where it shows you the base flood elevation on a cross section of the stream or river. Other areas of the county on smaller waterways, less populated areas, it's not always a detailed study area. So you have to contact the DNR, and we assist people with this all the time in determining what that base flood elevation is for that site. I'll send the map to the homeowner, help them send it to the DNR, they determine what the base flood elevation is, then they can give that information to their surveyor to determine how high their floor has to be. Certain areas it's there already, certain areas you just have to contact the DNR and they provide the base flood elevation.
And I like some of the clarifications you highlighted in the language about what's allowed below the BFE in like a home or a residence structure. I thought that was good, helpful information in the ordinance, so.
Okay, all right. Any other questions?
Confusion about that process, I think.
Yeah, if there can be. You used to refer to structures in some cases, and you'll see that now, like grain bins are included too, and rightfully so, I think.
All right, so this is a public hearing, adopting the revised floodplain. This is, if there's anybody else from the public that'd like to speak on it.
I'll move that we close the public hearing.
Okay. Motion by Jeff, second by Nathan. This is a roll call vote. Jeff, how do you vote?
Aye.
Nathan?
Aye.
I vote aye. Scott?
Aye.
And Doug?
Aye.
All right. Moving on to the next item, which would be the discussion and possible action to approve the ordinance adopting the new floodplain and management regulations for the first of the 3 readings.
So moved.
Motion by Jeff,
Second.
seconded by Scott. Any other discussion?
Do you think that was clear enough, Nancy, with their discussion for the motion to include the alternate language?
Yes,
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Okay, hearing no other discussion, this is a roll call vote. Jeff?
Aye.
Nathan?
Aye.
I vote aye. Scott?
Aye.
And Doug?
Aye.
All right. Thank you, Eric, on that. Moving on to item number 6 with Eric as well, too. Items with the planning and zoning administrator. Item A is discussion and possible action to approve the resolution 12-27-21-01 with the approval and combined preliminary final plat on the Muscatine Highway 61 subdivision.
Okay, on December 21st, the County Zoning Commission voted unanimously to recommend to you folks approval of the proposed industrial subdivision, Muscatine Highway 61 South subdivision. If you're familiar with River City Hardwoods down there along the bypass and where it joins right up against Higher Construction, River City Hardwoods is dividing up some of their property. Higher Construction through this process is purchasing a small sliver to kind of square up their property, accommodate a new septic system. That's the reason Higher is purchasing some of the property for a new building that they've put in down there. They're also developing lot 1 to the north of the existing River City Hardwood buildings. It was subdivision was necessitated by a previous split of this quarter section, so it's just basically splitting the existing one large parcel into 2 additional industrial subdivision lots. Really, only one of which could have a full new development on lot 1. The other one is just the sliver that Higher is purchasing to add on to their existing property.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
A motion by Jeff, a second by Nathan. On the review, it shows that there was 7 acres that was reviewed, but then the surveying says 7 acres too, but then the request is 28 acres.
So the parent parcel was around 28, 30 acres, what this was being carved out of, the parent parcel. So the actual subdivision lots is 6.0 acres for lot 1 and 1.72 acres, so 7.12 acres total is created in the subdivision lots. The remaining 7.72 acres is not part of the subdivision, it's non-developed land behind River City Hardwoods.
Okay.
So it kind of gets confusing when you look at parent parcel versus the lots that are being actually subdivided.
So what they're proposing of a subdivision, do you know, have they explained what they're trying to build, or it's just a subdivision for potential?
No, I think there was some, between River City Hardwoods and some separation of some LLCs, like there's Big Timber RC down there, Big Timber RC LLC, there's River City Hardwoods. I think they're just dividing up what is owned by one LLC and some land that would be by another one and could be sold off to someone else or utilized by another part of Mealy's business.
And so when they reviewed this was, in a sense, all areas were basically heavy industrial, correct?
Yes, it was already zoned all heavy industrial.
Okay. And so their subdivision is not trying to add like housing or anything like that?
No, there would be no housing allowed.
It looks like we just had a blue looking parcel and we're just trying to normalize
That's part of it.
the land.
And I just will point out, this did have to go in front of the city of Muscatine because it's within 2 miles of the city limits and it's already been approved by P and Z and possibly the city council already, I'm not sure.
Okay. Good. Any other questions or comments? All right, we have a motion by Jeff, second by Nathan. This is a roll call vote. Jeff?
Aye.
Nathan?
Aye.
I vote aye. Scott?
Aye.
And Doug? Aye. All right. Any other items? Eric?
Yeah,
Not yet?
back up later.
Okay. All right.
Right now.
Carpet and furniture's first, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Okay, moving on to item number 7. This is items with related Muscatine County capital projects, and this discussion and possible action to approve the change order, change order number 3 for the Muscatine County Attorney's Office remodel. This is to replace the carpet and vinyl wall base in the amount of $8,848.
Morning.
Good morning. Jim.
Came today to discuss a couple of changes that we're proposing to the county attorney's office project. Santos and Jeff came over last week after the meeting just to look around and kind of see what things look like now that the renovations are farther along than they've been. You can kind of start to piece things together, and what is first and probably most obvious is the carpet situation. The difference between the carpet installed in the front area, the carpet in the conference room that was created in the old county attorney's office, and then the remaining carpet in the center area. Well, it just isn't very aesthetically pleasing, and it's really probably endured its useful life. So they indicated maybe we should look at getting a quote to have the carpet in just the center areas, not the 6 surrounding offices. We wouldn't do those because it necessitates moving all the furniture and everything out of those offices. So this is just a quote for the center area to sort of mate up the carpet then in the front, the new entryway, and the conference room that's upstairs. That's the first one. The second one is the office furniture that we have in there. We're gonna have to get different furniture up front where the new window is because we're moving somebody up there. And we discussed the possibility of getting furniture for the other 2 legal secretaries to match. And so the quote you have from Story Kenworthy is the cost for all 3 of those locations, so that we had matching furniture we could move. One of the problems that we have is that the existing furniture for Barb and Danielle, when you move it, it's all interwired and connected, and it's a difficult and expensive process to move it around. So if you move it to replace the carpet, you'll spend a good sum of money just moving the furniture. And so I believe that furniture came with the office when the county attorney's office took it over. And so these 2 requests were not in the budget for the county attorney's office renovation. We've discussed them, as the board's aware, last summer, sort of quietly. The fine collection of money, or about $100,000 of that money that came back to the county from the county attorney's office based on a decision that I made. That money could, in theory, have been used for this sort of thing, but I felt like giving it back to the county was a more appropriate thing to do, and then coming to the board, just as I am today, is also the most appropriate thing to do. And so, if there's any questions or folks want to stop over and take a look at it, you're certainly welcome to do so. But that's, I think, a short summary of what we're interested in trying to do to maybe tie up those loose ends in the office space itself.
So I did look at Scott, you and I walked over
Right.
this too, Nathan.
Oh,
just-
it wasn't,
No, it's not.
Santos, we did it
Okay.
another time.
Oh, okay.
Doug
All
wasn't in Nathan, but if you walk into the attorney's office, and there's gonna be a reconfiguration of the spaces, and there's significant wear patterns in the carpet, and you're not gonna clean those out. It's not gonna be, and plus you have a pretty dramatic change right at the entry to the existing carpet. And I, in my mind, we'd be foolish not to put in good, the carpet at this. I think the new stuff will height wear patterns a little better and probably be a little easier for staff to maintain as well. It's a bit darker, got more pattern, so I think that, to me, made perfect sense. I have a little bit of a question, I know we got these kinda together here, Jim, on the 19,000, so part of the original project was that front station. Is this that as well, or no, that's,
That did not include the furniture.
okay,
And so what we looked at when we came to that crossroad was either building a permanent desk in there and then putting some furniture around it, or just going with the furniture. And by the time we put a permanent desk in there, that was about another 5,000 without the furniture. The furniture itself has now been cut down, but this covers 3 areas. The new front area, and then both of the other legal secretaries that are out front.
so we were gonna, of this 19, about 5 of it, we're gonna be spending anyway, 5 or 6, whatever it would be. So it's really an additional, and I think like Jim pointed out, you know, he did turn back a significant amount of change to the board that went into our general fund that we can utilize for this, so. I think it makes sense, you want people to have, I did walk through there a little bit, and I didn't, the workstations though, it was great, it's always great to get stuff for free, kind of, I don't know, with the building, they don't always meet your needs. And as I walked through the station, it looked like the staff was challenged using the spaces, the furniture that was provided, I think is a much better solution to give them what they need for doing their job, so.
So in these moves that we're doing, so the 2 existing ones that were already there, well, actually there's 3, cause you're gonna move one up. Those desks, do they need to have any changes as far as, you know, electronics or power sources now that those are all hardwired in?
Well,
I mean, will this new potential desk carry that?
We have 2 drops planned for the center area of the office. We have not installed those drops, waiting to see what happened with the furniture. And so now that once we can get the furniture and the carpet resolved, then we can figure out what to do with the wiring that's associated with it. So that's been delayed, already part of the project, but just haven't done it, waiting on this phase.
And the lead time for those desks, will they?
I
still
don't
meet
know the
time
answer
on
to that at this point.
So I mean, if we approve this, ideally, we probably wanna do those together, wouldn't we? So we
Right.
may wanna end
We
up
have to.
delaying on this.
We'd have to do what would, move the furniture to do the carpet, then do the desk at the same time, and then have the electrical, the wiring done
It
as
could be a
well.
month or 2 from now,
It could
depending on what.
it could be a bit
Okay.
before it comes to pass.
3 to 4 weeks, I'd say.
Okay.
Well, there's no question that when you walk in there and you've got all this nice new construction, where does your eye go, Jim?
Right to that carpet.
Yes, it does. And, it has substantial wear, and, this makes complete sense to me. Complete sense to me.
Okay, so,
So I would move the approval of change order number 3.
okay, so
I'd second.
we have a motion by Jeff, second by Scott for item A, change order number 3 of $8,848. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on to item number
Hang on, do
B.
you need to move, oh, I'm sorry, you're doing that, my bad.
Yeah, item number B is the discussion and possible action to accept the quote of Story Kenworthy in the amount of $19,153.49 for new furniture for the clerical areas as part of the Muscatine County Attorney's
Just a
Office.
quick clarification, that includes installation, right, on the furniture? That's-
Yes.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
I'll
Okay.
second it.
We have a motion by Jeff, a second by Scott. Any discussion? Nathan?
No, you're fine.
Okay. All right, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you, Jim, and we'll look
Thank you.
forward to seeing that coming up soon. Moving on to item number C, this is discussion and possible action to approve the quote from FSS in the amount for installation of security cameras and added video storage in the amount of $45,000 as part of the Muscatine County Jail Expansion Project. Wow.
Okay, going back in time a little bit, when the project was being put together in the design phase, Mike Nolan had reached out to JJ, and JJ had worked with jail staff to determine the camera and storage needs for the new booking area and holding cell area of the jail. Mike used that as part of his statement of probable cost. There does appear to be some disagreement between Mike and Sherry whether FSS was supposed to have been under the general contractor's contract. As you're aware, we've utilized JJ Keeler FSS here and there on smaller projects, different buildings, independently of the general contractors. So it was not put in as part of Swanson's bid, JJ's portion. JJ's been installing has been doing the work per the plans. It went into Mike's drawings where the camera locations were, but it was not part of Swanson's contract. And so when he submitted his first pay app, Sherry caught me and said, how come this isn't part of Swanson's contract? And Mike said, well, we've ran JJ separately because of our relationship with him and our to maintain consistency with our other systems, and that's the way we wanted to do it. So there was a little bit of disagreement. So JJ had submitted a pay app to us. Talking to Sherry and Nancy, they both pointed out to me, well, we don't have an actual approved quote if we're contracting straight with JJ on that. So we have not paid him anything yet for his work, so we are bringing this forward to you. So we have a formal signature on the quote from FSS for his portion of the work in the jail project.
Yeah, I remember the discussions, and I know that this is not the first time, because, you know, we've typically, JJ's done all of our service, FSS has anyway. And, you know, I agree with not running it through the generals, because then he's just gonna add overhead and profit to it. And why would we pay, you know, give me the number, 10 or 15% more, when we know this is the contractor we prefer to use? He's done all of our other work, and you know, we originally let all this work out for bid, and he's always been very competitive. He's always been the successful bidder, so I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I will say, I do recall some discussions with Johnson Controls. For the Sheriff's Department project, we had kind of broke that off and handled some of that separately, and it was, let's just say, more problems than what it was worth for staff. We've had a lot of issues with service calls and timeliness, and so we did put Johnson Controls under the general contractor to just make them deal with coordinating that sub, but FSS did not get put in. We've always dealt with JJ independently on that. So just to make sure that we're not violating any auditing rules, we really need you to approve the agreement with FSS between us.
Do we not have a limit that we normally have to require multiple bids anyway?
Well, there would be, depending on if it's federal money or we have procurement policies.
Right, the requirement for public bidding, the threshold for that is 110,000, I believe.
And I think, you know, much of this work, I think we've always handled as a service contract, because the hardware is a piece of it, certainly not all of it. It's probably 50-50 at best.
At best, it's actually probably more installment cost than it is
Yeah,
in setup costs than equipment.
install and setup probably greater than equipment.
I guess I'm just concerned knowing that we're only utilizing one vendor and we're not potentially putting ourselves at risk. If FS has gone, I mean, do we have other options, or do we have other vendors to look at for contractors to provide that service?
Well, I think, yeah, Nancy, correct me here if I'm wrong, but as long as we're within our procurement policy, if the boards approve certain limits, that we don't have to go out for bid, and then even when you do, there are sometimes allowances for specialized services and contractors. Certainly when we have his systems throughout other buildings to maintain consistency, I think there's some flexibility there as well. So I don't think we're violating anything when we're under this.
And I guess I'm not trying to say I'm concerned about the violation. I'm more concerned about
Just getting the best bids. And
well, not just that, but I mean, if FSS is no longer here next year, you know, who else are we looking at for other providers? Can they continue to service those same, you know, softwares, hardware systems? When we put ourselves at concerns of saying, hey, this is who we always use, well, that doesn't really say that long term. When we start saying we're putting this all in all of our infrastructures, you know, long term, is that the best option when we say that we're only providing one service? And maybe they're local, I don't know, I don't even know who this group is. I'm just explaining that, you know, when we don't put that out there, then we potentially put ourselves at risk, depending on how that organization is, you know, set up. If we believe that has a long term, I think that was my only concern from that.
Well, we certainly do believe that he is local, and we certainly do believe it's long-term. Our concern with approaching other vendors is he already has the setup for all the rest of stuff in the jail, and we have found from past experience, when we try to make different setups and systems talk to each other, that becomes quite a problem. We already have the security cameras and such all set up with FSS.
with this group.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is the challenge with all of these type of systems. I will say, if you look at what we're dealing with right now in the jail with the controls, you know, most of these, you know, there are a limited universe of people that make these kinds of systems, and then you have vendors that represent those. So if you ever make a change, you're looking at a wholesale change unless you wanna have, we dealt with that with the jail for a while, and I don't remember the lock vendor, but we had, you know, the original went out on public bid, and the two, and then we got two different lock vendors, and we did nothing but fight issues until we spent more money, changed them all to one, and then got that consistency. So these are areas, I think, in our contracting, as we look at it, you know, we have to be pretty diligent, you know, because probably even specification wise on what are allowable hardware vendors, because it's not all interchangeable.
Yeah. No, and
Unfortunately.
I understand that, but I think if a vendor knows that you are the only provider for them, then they have the potential to put you as an organization at risk of saying, hey, well, my hardware cost just went up 50%, and you're gonna have to eat that cost.
Well, we certainly evaluate
And I guess that's what I'm getting at.
each
is-
proposal,
so I'm
if
just
we get one
sharing my
that's
input on
out
it.
of line,
So-
we would look elsewhere.
All my input is on what I'm sharing.
And I will say
understand.
the components that FSS uses are not FSS produced components.
Right.
They are pretty industry standard cameras that I would think that another security camera contractor would be familiar with. I mean, he doesn't manufacture his own system. He uses industry standard equipment. That's very common. And while he's local, he has been expanding to a pretty good area around the QC metro down towards even into Illinois, and so he's using very industry standard equipment.
All right, well, I trust your judgment. It was just more of a question, in my opinion, of those things to make sure that we watch out for them. Okay, so
I'll make a motion.
we have a motion by Jeff,
Second.
second by Scott. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Any opposed? Okay, item C approved. Moving on to item number D, discussion and possible action to accept the quotes of Lucas Communications and Nelson Electric for the additional power outlets and data cabling in the booking area in the amount of $8,369 as part of the Muscatine County Jail expansion project.
Okay, when we were doing one of our walkthroughs in the booking area prior to it being turned over phase one, staff discovered that there was really a real lack of power supply and data networking installed into the booking area. Not at all what Bill Riley visualized or thought that he'd expressed to Mike Nolan what should be in there. And certainly jail staff as well. So we talked about what their needs would be and determined that we needed a significant additional number of data ports in the booking desks and booking areas. We asked Swanson to prepare a change order to add some extra data ports and power supplies on the walls and in the booking areas. When we got that proposed change order, it was going to be $14,580, and that also, there was another $4,000 some dollars that we'd already approved on a change order to add power and data ports to a wall where the big security monitors, I don't know if you recall those, That work had not been done yet. I discussed this with Mike Nolan, he discussed it with electrical engineers, we thought that that amount was quite out of line. And so we looked at other options, and I reached out to Nelson Electric and Lucas Communication, and we did a couple walkthroughs and told them, hey, this is what our needs are, and these are the quotes. So you can see a couple local contractors are able to accomplish this work for significant savings. It was, we'll get a credit back for the work that was approved on change order that Swanson has not done yet. We told them to hold up. We were looking at a more comprehensive view of the needs in that area. Plus there was a temporary wall there, so they hadn't been able to do that portion that was previously approved. And we told them just wait on that. And so my recommendation is for us to utilize these two local contractors to provide those data and power needs. And that's why we didn't bring another change order to you through the Swanson contract.
Eric, I may be rusty or forgetful. I feel like we've dealt with this issue before on a change order, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong there. First of all,
We did it on the county attorney's office.
I thought we
It
did
was the
something
county
in the
attorney's
booking
office
area.
when we did yours.
We
In
dealt
their
with
office up front, too.
the desks.
Yes.
But when we had a drawing that you presented for him that was very similar to that.
There-
We ended up adding cable and power because we talked about moving that one area up front, so I
We
think
had
that
to
might
do,
be.
we had to do some additional data and power needs at the county attorney's office. And you have approved a change order for the booking area that was pretty limited that time. It was around $4,000, and that addressed data and power up on a wall where two large TV screens.
what I think.
That's the one that was approved that we put the brakes on, and we're actually proposing that and all the additional data needs to have Lucas and Nelson do it at a great savings, because Swanson had not done that yet. And JJ had actually looked at some of our plans and came up with an option that actually saved us some money. So Mike Nolan issued a revised drawing for that area where those monitors were that would actually save some money there. And then when we got their quote for the additional data and power, we felt the amount was way too high, and we looked at these other options.
So, but you said that Bill thought that that all this was supposed to be in the plan.
Well, I think hindsight being 20/20, moving forward, I think there was certainly opportunity to have brought Bill in on the very beginning of the design phase. Jail staff feels like what they described as their needs really weren't put into the design plan, that there was a very minimal amount of data and power put in these desks for the future. And when we started looking at them, and Bill started setting up computers, they're just really, also at the end of in December, they went to an internet-based phone system over there that was gonna take up some of the existing data. It was just not gonna be sufficient for their needs in the future.
So, are you confident saying this oversight is on us, or is it on somebody else?
Possibly somewhere in the middle. I mean, short of sitting down with the prints in a magnifying glass and with Bill Riley and I spending hours counting the symbols where data ports were supposed to have been, I don't know that we'd have caught this any sooner.
Okay.
I feel like in today's time, there should have been more planned in those areas as part of you just would have put more data.
Yeah, it's the question of future proofing, cause a transition to a voice over IP phone system is a significant change in data delivery. And if that wasn't planned for in the front of it, it would have a pretty big impact on data ports for sure. Because you can, a lot of them, they just steal the computer data port, run it through the phone, limits your data bandwidth, does all kinds of other things. It'll work fine, but it's not the ideal way to do it. So that really, I think the key is probably as we move forward with our contracting, is we probably need to think about having Bill more involved. And I think probably rather than just thinking about wiring for today, we need to be talking about future proofing our wiring a little bit, because like Cat 6 cables, 20 cents a foot, put 4 of the dang things in there, cause we're only gonna need more rather than less. I promise you that.
And there will be a few extra lines that won't be put into service. We're planning for some future use. Not a whole lot, because we didn't want to spend more money than necessary, but we're thinking this would be the cheaper time to put a couple extra up in there. And we did, I think Bill was a little more involved in a little more in consistent on some of the needs in the county attorney's office, like when he was seeing what wasn't going in over there, so that was something that we learned that, hey, we really need to have Bill take a look at these plans thoroughly at the very beginning of the project, and I just don't think that was done.
I think that's a good item for that feedback session, that when we end up, completing the project, capital critique or whatever we wanna call it, I think that would be a good feedback item for that. My question on this too is, knowing that we have multiple different contractors that we're possibly gonna be working simultaneously on that, do you plan on trying to do this now and then Swanson's just working side by side on that, or?
They're most likely gonna come in right after.
After
Booking
everything's-
area is up and semi-operational, so they're gonna work directly with jail staff for the best scheduling, but
Yeah,
it was a challenge. I met with Nelson after hours, so we weren't bumping into the.
I would rather have that, because you're gonna start having conflicts and then there's pointing fingers and,
We're dealing with that.
okay, good. All right, I appreciate that, Eric, and thank you for
So I'll
working through
move to
that.
approve.
Okay, we have a motion by Jeff,
I'll second.
second by Scott. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on to item number 8. This is discussion and possible action to approve the minutes of December 20th, 2021's regular meeting. We have a motion by Scott,
I'll second.
second by Jeff. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on to item number 9, it's correspondence. Jeff?
Eric, can I ask you a question? I'm gonna jump back for a second, you mind. Who was our, electrical engineer, Axiom?
Yes.
Okay. I had nothing to note. I had the COVID updates and such, and so I had nothing to note.
Okay. Nathan?
Same here.
All right, I had, the same thing on the COVID. I had also the email that Nathan had sent out of the Mississippi Valley Fair, Mississippi Valley Workforce Development Position Director opening. Had an email from Eric, reader from the chamber, sharing that, our Muscatine County was down to 3% unemployment, which is really good, but yet we still need jobs. We still need people to fill those jobs. I think was your comment. And then I also had the pictures that were sent from the culvert that was down over by that concerned area that we had over by Boxcar Road that Keith had went to go look at, and I appreciate that was there. And I got a letter also from Clean Air Muscatine, identifying some questions and concerns around how much green energy MPW is working on. That's all I had for correspondence. Scott?
All I had was just a COVID update, and that was it.
Okay. Doug?
Had a email from a resident on Kelly Avenue with a complaint of a nuisance property, and I just talked to Eric about that this morning. That's all I had.
Okay. Okay. Committee reports. Jeff?
On the 17th, we had the Eastern Iowa Mental Health Region Governing Board meeting. We approved a number of things, probably most important, I don't know if we talked about, so we have our respite, Rhonda's house, was that Pier Run Respite up in Clinton, they had lost their lease. So it began a big discussion about that and some peer run services, so the governing board has had done 3 grants, basically, one to Vera French, one to Rhonda's house, and one to MCSA, to expand peer run respite services in the region. If, for those of you that don't know, the peer run services are where we're getting our biggest bang for our buck. We're getting tremendous utilization. We're having good results. It's kind of it's been a very good process for us. So I think that the MCSA submitted a project and it's been approved, so. that's probably good.
So it's wrong that they can't operate now?
They leased from Genesis, so they just have a issue getting, they have to move, so they're given time.
Got
But
it.
they've been given notice that they're gonna lose their lease, cause Genesis is doing some kind of a project plan on their campus, and that facility that they've been in is part of the schedule for overhaul or something, so. So we will continue to have peer run respite in the region.
All right.
Hopefully more access now with two other places getting more, contracts for it.
Nice.
Okay, that's it.
All right. Moving on to, Nathan.
I did not have any.
I didn't have any committee reports either.
I had none.
I had on the 14th at 6 o'clock, we had a sponsorship meeting for the Fair Board where we discussed how we're gonna work on sponsorships and, kind of a new plan. And then on the 15th was the annual meeting for Wilton Development, and Ted Maroff put together a movie or a short film about the city of Wilton that's pretty interesting. And I'm pretty sure you guys will see it during budgeting that they're gonna
No.
present that. It was pretty cool.
Cool.
Good, good.
That's all I had.
All right. Okay, then moving on to item number 11, this is items with the administration office. Item A, discussion possible action regarding the raising of the limit of the Muscatine County cyber breach insurance.
So I had emailed the board members about this a while back, when we did we do a renewal of our whole insurance package on December 6th each year. This year, they included an optional quote for an additional $1 million to bump our limit from 250,000 to $1 million for cybersecurity breach at a cost of $15,692.
$15,000 more.
Yeah, almost $16,000 more. So,
What do we pay now?
I don't know that I'm gonna be able to tell you that.
Okay.
I don't know because it's wrapped into, it's not a separate line item.
Line item
Yeah.
not for that?
No,
Okay.
So 15 grand for 750,000 more coverage.
Mm-hmm.
So if we expect a 2% rate of needing this, then that is worthwhile. That makes sense.
And what all does it cover? Does it cover? What does the cyber breach, what does it protect us from?
I don't know that I can answer that question.
Cause I know, we know that the city had an issue a couple of years ago. We didn't get affected.
Yeah.
It kinda cut off at Muscom, right? But it was crippling to the
Yeah,
city.
it totally did. I
crippling.
mean, it
And-
ultimately ended up making some major challenges, but I think that's the same thing that I was like, does it
question
cover
is what-
ransomware? Does it cover,
What expenses does it reimburse?
yeah, what does it help us out in if we
How
have
about if I
costs?
scheduled Jeff Miller to come in and talk to you guys?
That'd be good.
Okay? Yep,
Cause I'm not opposed to it if it helps us recoup some of the expense that we would more than likely experience.
The biggest
if we
one that
had
I
a
saw was
major
a
one.
lot of staff time because it took all of the systems
Yeah,
down, and then
I don't understand what we're buying.
yeah, and then they came
Yeah.
back
Exactly.
with, the city had that they were being ransomed, the,
right.
you know, they
Ransomware,
basi-
yeah.
they basically were telling us, hey, we'll let go of your system, but you need to pay us this much money. So, I mean, I guess that would be a real interesting piece to share with.
I will have schedule Jeff to come in and talk to you guys about that one.
Sweet.
And then if you could ask could they line item out that piece? Cause I know that I think the city paid another $25K for their cyber insurance when I was there.
Okay, yep.
So it would be interesting to see what we would have if they could line that
You
out.
just wanna make sure you're not shutting the barn door after the horses are gone.
All right, so, okay, then we'll move on to item B. So then we'll just table that till next week. Discussion and possible direction regarding budgeting personnel costs for FY 22/23 proposed budget.
So for the last probably 20 years, I've had a pretty good idea where the board would want to end up salary-wise. And so in terms of coming up with what to put in the budget. I had prepped numbers for this year, and then I had a conversation with Scott that led me to think I probably need to have some conversation with you guys based on what the assessor's office was, what was approved for assessor's office salaries. Scott being one of the people on the subcommittee for that makes those determinations. The numbers that they use there are certainly much closer to the current cost of living number that's floating out there of 5.9%.
So you're thinking that right now, currently, if we were not to really have discussion, you possibly would be budgeting yourself at 5 to 6%?
That's why I want some direction from you. That's certainly not the number, anywhere near the number I prepped. But if the board is interested in a higher number, I need to know that now. I might as well know that now, and I'm saying a higher number in terms of what you want to put in the budget.
Yeah.
Because if we budget too low and then you decide to do something higher, that's going to trigger a budget amendment and probably some comments in our audit.
So, yeah, so this is a difficult one, I think, because, we have some long-term contracts that we've just signed in the
Yeah,
last year.
I don't know how that affects
4
that
of them.
stuff.
Well, yeah, there are a lot, so you could take whatever stance you chose, but you also have to think about the future when any stance you take. I think we all know right now, we are in a period of what we would have traditionally called hyperinflation. And I don't know when it abates, and so all of our employees are gonna experience a reduction in purchasing power on their wage, and I don't know what the whole economy is doing with it. I can tell you, from my private business that wages are up significantly.
Wow.
If you just go down the street and look at, I see convenience stores offering starting pay of $15 an hour. They were 10, a year and a half, 2 years ago. So you're seeing pretty significant increases. What effect does that have? I don't know. And then, my thought on, so we sat down in good faith with bargaining units and we did some work. And you can always, you can take one of two approaches with that, I would always be, I never wanna shoot myself in the foot for the long term. I wanna have a good relationship with everybody and I wanna be fair. And, a long-term contract has a lot of benefits to us, just from staff time and effort and all that.
I think the biggest.
I think we have to think about all of that.
Yeah. Well,
On the other side of the coin too, you think about what was, you think about what is, and nobody knows where it's gonna go.
I have no
But,
idea.
but with that being said, you still have to be able to afford to meet that payroll.
Right.
You have to afford to meet that payroll, and so there are consequences to any financial decision like this, in that looking at the labor market, and I think a person has to be conscious of the amount of jobs that are available throughout the country. And I agree with you, Jeff, in the sense that you want to be fair, and you want to make sure you keep your good and long-term employees. On the other side of the coin, what can you afford? And of course, the contracts that were negotiated previously, those individuals are going to feel slighted. It's really a no-win situation, because it's even more than a double-edged sword. But I think we have to come up with some type of a plan that we feel is going to be fair to the previous contracts, and also be able to afford whatever numbers that the board deems is workable, you know? So, you know, in the past history, you know, we've been at roughly that 3% number, you know, give or take a smidge there,
2.5 to 3.
yeah.
Is typically where
And
we've run.
at the same time, I always keep a close eye on what the COLA numbers are in the country. And of course, that number is
5.
substantially more. So it's just gonna have to be a board decision on where this shakes out at in what's a fair number to compensate the employee base. At the same token, trying to satisfy those employees in the sense of not losing core employees to other employers. Now, figure that number out.
Well, ideally, when we do the 2 to 3%, that is based off inflation, correct? Or what is that?
More or
based off
less,
of?
yeah.
Okay, so if we were to say that inflation was truly at a 6% increase and we were to come back and propose a 3%, we technically would look at it, or an employee would look at it like they're getting a 3% reduction. Because in a sense, they're not making more money when inflation is actually going up at 6%. So
But-
it's a challenge, like
It
you
is.
mentioned. So when you have morale issues and employees are saying, hey, wow, I'm only getting a 2.5% increase. Yeah, I'm getting an increase, but inflation is up. And if that's the base that you use, you're right. They're gonna have morale issues, and you're gonna have employees that are gonna say, hey, I got 3 other businesses that are looking at my services that are close to where I live, and they're giving a 6% increase. I understand your perspective. I think that it is a slippery slope. It is difficult to look at, but I think
At the same token, a phrase that I use all the time, everybody's gotta be able to live. You know, I mean, I understand the position on both sides of this completely.
I would feel more comfortable with going with a higher inflation potential, but I know that those could raise a lot of concerns with, you know, how do we fund that?
How much money is that? Kind of is the delta here in terms of what you were thinking versus what this new number may be?
I don't know that I can answer that right now because I didn't really crunch difference numbers because I had no idea where you guys were gonna go.
Sure.
So what I'm looking for, I guess, right now is some direction from you about what information do you want to see in
I'd
order.
like to see incremental, you know, like what is each percent cost
Percent,
us?
okay,
Yeah, what's a 1% increase? It should be a linear relationship, so what would be a 1% increase? What would
Okay.
be a 2%, you know, what's a?
And I'm not saying my thought process was correct on that, but when you have this situation, there's a lot to think about.
yep.
Yeah.
I guess being empathetic and looking at the employee's position, I think that if you were to give them a lower percentage, we would see repercussions long-term.
Same
And I think-
time, that's funded by property taxes. We got people on fixed incomes whose money's already buying less, and we ask them to pay more. I mean, it's a
But the.
quadruple edged sword.
It is.
When housing prices are going up, you're gonna see that. That's what we talked about. The assessors seeing that because housing is going up and people are buying them and selling them. They're gonna see that.
And Nancy, when will we have, the assessors?
Valuation?
numbers? Yeah,
We typically get
Early
around January 1st, so,
so we'd have to see.
yep.
Okay.
I don't know if we'll have that by next Monday or not, but I will have some numbers crunched for you to take a look at and contemplate.
I think, you know, I would just make the comment that I think this board has always acted pretty reasonably and fairly. In the 10 or 12 years I've been here, we certainly had a number of years where there was no inflation. If you went totally based on, cost of living allowance, we would have taken money back or given none, and we gave. So I think it's a, you know, it's kind of it's a balancing act at best. And I think this is gonna be a really challenging year. So I think if we have an idea of what it is per dollar, per percent, and then maybe we should have some brief discussions, probably even before budget.
Yes,
We'll
that's,
talk about that
I will
again.
come back with some numbers next week, because what I will need from you next week is kind of what
Where are we gonna go?
the max you want. I kind of need to know what you want to put in, what that max is. You're not necessarily deciding that's what you're giving for raises, but the budget is meaningless to you guys without personnel numbers in it.
Yeah, right.
So I need some sort of starting point. And I just didn't want that starting point to be way too low, because then again, the budget's meaningless to you guys if you're thinking a higher number. That's where we need to start, and then we can work down from there if you choose to. But I'll come back next week with some percentage numbers and some possible, we had some discussion about funding. We may not be able to have all of that discussion until we have the valuation numbers, but some.
And that evaluations numbers are for the year before, not actually the year.
Well,
after,
the
right?
valuation numbers are for what
So it's an
we'll
18-month
collect
lag.
taxes on.
It's
Okay.
what we'll collect taxes on, but the typically you have an 18-month lag between the market and what comes through on the assessor's books. They're acting on, so the ultra high sale prices, we won't see that probably till next year's, not 2022, you know, because when did the real estate market really start climbing? It's been pretty much,
Probably been at least
but it'll be another
18 months.
probably, we won't see the full effect of that probably for another 6 to 8 months. Probably the next budget cycle, we'll really start seeing it. We'll see a little bit of it now, but not the extent we're going to. Cause like you said, the numbers are crazy.
You know, Jeff, I never thought about one of the points you made on this, and that is, it's a true statement that when the COLA numbers were incredibly low, the raises that the board approved were well above the COLA number per se, percentage-wise. So if you're gonna take and really set your thought process at the bar of the COLA number, you're gonna have these years where you're gonna have a very low number on COLA again at some point in time down the road. It's gonna happen. So then what are you gonna do? At that point in time, are you gonna tell these same people that, well, here's a COLA number at a half a point, and that's where you're gonna be. So there's gonna be a negative position there as well, correct?
Kinda like my dad always said, you gotta watch what you wish for.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, you know, and I think the board has always been very reasonable and looked at that and tried to make common sense decisions around that. And I think that's what we're gonna be, I think this is gonna be a really challenging year, really challenging budget year. Plus, we also have mental health budget that's gonna throw another ringer into us this year, right? Because we pulled back. Is this the year that it comes completely off the county?
Yes.
Okay, so, you know, we
I
have
will.
a lot of things in the air.
I think we will still be paying some personnel, at least some personnel costs.
Right.
And then we'll be reimbursed by the region for those that are related to mental health.
Yeah. Tell me about that, maybe.
All right, so I have some direction there
Yep.
about what I need to be doing. And then the last thing that we need to discuss is regarding the OSHA COVID vaccine or testing mandate.
Might I say you're just a bundle of sunshine?
I am today. As you may know, OSHA had issued temporary requirement for any employers with over 100 employees to require either their employees be vaccinated or tested weekly. Then the stay was put on that. When it was appealed, that stay was taken off on the 17th. And it's scheduled to be heard, arguments to be heard by the Supreme Court
January 7th.
January 7th. But the OSHA regs, as they stand now, we have to have it implemented by January 10th. Or we could start being sanctioned, all but the testing part. The testing part, we have till February 7th or 9th.
So what is the regime that we're required to have?
So I think, at this point, I think we can't wait and see what happens on the 7th.
Right.
Well, we can, but then we're gonna risk being non-compliance and being penalized for that. The fine is $13,000, 13,000 plus some change. I don't know if that's per employee. I looked on the OSHA site and I really couldn't get any information on that, but typically OSHA fines are per employee. I mean, that's typically the way it is. So what I'm looking for from you guys today is the okay for me to send out communication to all of our employees. The first step in this process is we need to find out who's vaccinated and who's not. If somebody chooses not to want to tell me that, then we're going to assume they're not vaccinated. Anybody that's not vaccinated as of January 10th will be required to, number one, wear a mask at all times unless they're in a room, they work in a room all by themselves, or they're outdoors all the time. And it will require us to have the employee test weekly and provide proof of the results of that test. It cannot be a test that they self-administer and self-read. So we're gonna need to figure out how that, there's no requirement that the employer pay for the testing. We can require the employee to pay for that, but that's a decision you guys are gonna have to make.
Are tests even available? I mean,
Well,
everything I've been reading says there's a massive shortage.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how all that's gonna work. With the Christmas, nobody expected that stay to be lifted right before the Christmas holiday. But it's left us kind of in a scramble here, because it's gonna take a little bit of time to figure out the testing, about if testing's even available and how that's all gonna work. But
How many employees do we have?
we have, if you count Muscatine, which I think we need to, we have about 235.
And how are OSHA fines enforced?
Uh,
So say OSHA finds us. How do they make us pay?
Well, I guess I've never
I
gotten
don't
that. Anyone I've ever seen, when they sent the citation, you either negotiated a settlement or you paid it. But there's an enforcement mechanism in there somewhere.
I think probably one of the biggest risks would be withholding federal funds,
Sure.
which would be millions of dollars.
Which is always the card they play.
Our road money, some of the other monies that we get, or I don't know how much, just lots of our funds, lots of county funds are tied to federal dollars and some, workforce funds, all kinds of stuff, so.
So the email system would be you utilizing your system to try to you send it out to staff, ideally share with them, hey, this is a requirement that we're needing to follow up through. And then do we need to show proof of that to them?
Yes, they need to provide proof. I have an employee communication that was actually drafted by one of the labor attorneys that we use frequently.
Okay.
That kind of says, hey, this is what's going on, the rules aren't final yet, but at this point, this is what I need. So yes, they have to provide me proof, and it outlines what's considered proof. It explains to them that if they choose not to, we're gonna consider them not vaccinated, and go forward based on that.
And this is all based on the administration's, temporary emergency regulations issued under OSHA that the administration conceded might be illegal.
This started really in mid-November, and Nancy and I met and discussed it. We gathered together kind of a draft policy for the county and a draft employee communication. And then we're just sort of monitoring it as it went along, because it got stayed. And the thinking was, well, it got stayed and,
We'll hear
probably
something in
stayed there
January.
until the Supreme Court hears it. Well, that didn't happen. And so now we're really forced into getting the employee information is our big step, and seeing what that looks like. And then obviously the testing phase of it is, but we've got some breathing room for that.
What kind of HIPAA issues do we have here?
Well, Nancy keeps it all anyway in a locked box in her office. She's a designated recipient, so she would continue to be that person. That information would be in the employee's protected file, and we wouldn't be sharing that necessarily with anybody beyond maybe a percentage or numbers
Right.
of if you have 232 employees, you got X amount vaccinated.
Now, is there a waiver or anything in the OSHA regulations that allows us to request this kind of protected health information? Or basically exempts us from, HIPAA issues here?
I don't think we're exempted from HIPAA, we're allowed to request it as part of a mandate, and we have to do that, and then protect it just like we would any other medical information. And then, of course, there's, you've got issues of, can they provide you with a certification that they were vaccinated? Can they not do that? Do they sign an affidavit? But anybody that basically can't provide the proof is gonna be treated as a non-vaccinated person, and then you're subject to the mass and the weekly testing at whoever's cost the board determines.
My opinion, for what it's worth, which may not be much, is that this is an illegal decision, and having taken an oath to uphold the Constitution, until the Supreme Court tells me it's the law, I don't regard it as the law, and I'm not interested in taking any action on it until then.
Yeah, I don't consider myself an anti-vax person at all, but I also don't think that this is I think this is tremendous overreach. I think it is gonna destroy the institution we know as OSHA, if it's allowed to move forward. OSHA was there to protect workplace health and safety, and I think this is big time overreach, and could destroy that whole institution, make it a political football, which is terrible thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, the challenge is, is if this were my money, I wouldn't be going, because they say, go ahead and try to squeeze it out of me, but this is county taxpayers, it's their money, and that's my concern. Do we have to have a posture? I've seen in private workplaces what happened when this got pushed along to the stage where we're at. They started losing good employees. And it's gonna happen to us, and if you don't think it was, you're just mistaken.
Yep.
And
Far more than a couple
I'm not
percents.
interested in that.
Yeah, far more than a couple percents on a
Yeah.
cost of living increase.
Yeah.
This is gonna piss people off.
I'm not interested in that, because as you saw, you just said today, we have unemployment under 3% in Muscatine County, and we will struggle to get people willing to work for us.
Yep.
I don't know.
So, there's a couple organizations here in Muscatine that have started to take the steps towards implementing this. Again, I see your perspectives and I understand that, but I think my concern is until we have that Supreme Court, I think we should at least be taking some sort of preliminary steps to follow through, because what if the Supreme Court does come back in and say it is law? Now we're scrambling.
They're gonna provide an enforcement window. And to address Jeff's point,
But
getting
that's-
federal agencies to talk to each other about pulling federal funding takes forever. They don't talk to each other in the best of times.
So, yeah, but you're saying that you're thinking that they're gonna have an enforcement window, but isn't that already set by what's in law? They're just gonna either vote on it being approved or not approved.
Well, I think the Supreme Court will not set a law. Yeah, there is a process for setting a law in the United States, and that's through the legislative body. And so I think that's the whole tussle here, is if it is a law, then there's a process it needs to go through, and it hasn't gone through that process. I don't think bureaucracies can set laws, the last time I checked. They can enforce laws, and they can set rules around the enforcement of the law. And that'll become, this is gonna be an interesting test of the court, so.
So, what should we share as direction then?
Scott, Doug, what do you guys?
Here's what I think, in the overall picture. If you wanna get vaccinated, get vaccinated. If you don't. That's my position, it's that simple in my mind. If you feel that that you want to accept the risk, whatever the risk is, which I certainly don't know, and I don't think anyone else does either, of not being vaccinated, then you accept that risk. And, you know,
There's people vaccinated that are getting COVID,
oh heavens, yes.
so it's not a guarantee either.
No,
And I think it's a person's own right what they wanna do.
Well, and this doesn't require anybody to be vaccinated. It simply requires them to be tested if, and I'm not defending
No, I know.
this at all,
No.
this just requires them to be tested weekly.
You can go to
provides proof of
Walgreens
test.
and get a COVID test. I mean,
I
a
mean-
kit to take home
A kit,
and do your
well,
own.
But there is a
But,
big shortage on
you
that.
can't, you're not gonna be able to use one of the kits that you
Cell
buy
phone
that
kit.
you take home,
You
test
can't-
yourself and read the results yourself. That's not
it
allowed.
can't be self-administered.
Right.
And getting
It
an
can be
appointment-
self-administered, but then it's
Take a
gotta be
long
read by somebody else.
And you gotta do this every week, so you gotta mail it in, get your results mailed back to you. I mean, pain in the ass.
It's to make it as absolutely inconvenient as possible to apply
Forced
pressure,
compliance.
to apply pressure
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
to be vaccinated, even if you don't, that's not really your choice.
And if this
It'll
administration,
become a full-time job for Nancy.
sure it would. And if this administration wants people testing, you know, they probably should have taken some action from the FDA to approve tests that have been sitting in the approval queue for months and months. You know.
All right, so we need direction to give to
My direction would
Nancy.
be wait for the Supreme Court. That was what I would say.
And my 2 cents is, I mean, I appreciate all of those comments, and there's truth to all of them. But, you know, I can't advise you to ignore what may be a legal ramification.
Sure.
And, I'm not sure the step of figuring out as between, now and early January, when the Supreme Court hears it, who is or isn't vaccinated, to see where we're at is a huge step. You know, certainly we aren't necessarily, we're just trying to find out at this particular juncture where we're at in the greater scheme of things with percentages. By the 7th, we may have more direction, and if there's gonna have to be testing, we've got until February, so I don't disagree with anybody's comments, but my personal opinion aside, I just can't.
No,
I can't ever.
You gotta make sure we're
anybody
kosher.
do that, and that's the risk.
Yeah.
And I mean, and there's a publicity side of that we need to be aware of, because that can be run, in a direction it isn't intended either, you know, saying, I wanna wait till the Supreme Court decides on the 7th is maybe interpreted as I don't wanna do it, and I'm just ignoring it,
So-
that's not what you're suggesting.
No.
But that's where it goes, and I think. we
So,
just need to-
so what you've put together thus far, Nancy, would be a letter that explains the decision we're faced with, as we know it, all the information as we know it. You know, which I don't have, I think it's great to let everybody know that. The other thing that I don't really have a problem with, as long as people know that it's their choice, to share whether their vaccination status, whether if they choose to, that's fine. If they choose not to, that's fine by me as well. Cause quite frankly, I don't think it's my business, I don't care.
And I feel like
Go no further.
the employee communication piece that we had to send out lays that out very clearly. This is what's going on, this is where this whole thing stands. So we need to start implementing, and we're doing the step where we're asking you if you've been vaccinated. If you say that you have, these are the types of things that I can accept as proof. You're not required to tell me, but if you choose not to, and the Osha mandate continues, then you will be required to be tested.
And I
You're
would want
required to test weekly and wear a mask.
I would want people to understand where I'm at is, if the Supreme Court views it as a lawful order, I follow the laws.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to deal with that, yeah.
So
But I doubt that they would do that.
I think employees might be interested in what the cost to them would be if they choose not to answer the basic. That's gonna be part of their decision.
Well, but unfortunately, that's not something I can provide at this time. I mean, it's gonna take some time to sort out first off, I need to know if we're paying for testing or if employees are, and then figure out where they can get, what tests will work, where they can get them, all of those things, are still up in the air.
Well, I'll give you an opinion. My opinion is if I demand you wear safety shoes, I help pay for those shoes as a part of employment. If I'm demanding that you have some kind of test, I should pay for that as an employer.
Yeah,
I think our employees are gonna have a lot of questions, and then it becomes an issue of how much do you share with the department head, because that's gonna ultimately affect us if I have no employees that show up.
Yep.
Yes, yeah. It's,
So
So,
it's a no-win.
yeah,
They put us into a no-win situation.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, would Nancy be able to share with me that I have to monitor employee A has to be wearing a mask in my office?
I'll have to share that with you as department head, cause I can't,
How exactly
I
do
can't
OSHA
be in
enforce
every, I
that?
can't be out in the whole county observing
We got
that.
guys out on the plow, they gotta be wearing masks?
No, those guys that, guys out in the plow isn't gonna have to wear a mask because they're working alone. I mean, at least during the time that,
Well, what if they got two guys in there doing something?
it's,
do you have more than one person in the plow truck?
I mean, right now, today we do.
Then they-
Training people. I mean,
Then if one of them was
showing our
unvaccinated,
out.
Well, and I try.
They would have to wear a mask
I try
then.
to understand, this whole protected health information.
yeah.
If you have to do that, how do you protect health information?
so
You can't,
what, so,
it can't work with this.
okay, so then just again, the item is for us to provide direction, but I can share with you, I have seen other organizations, how they're implementing some of these things. For example, in the two plow people, both of them are wearing a mask, so nobody really knows. If they're ever working in enclosed areas, they're wearing a mask. If they're out by themselves, they don't need to wear a mask. There's ways around that and still providing the protection
So
from
everybody
HIPAA.
does it.
Yeah, it's basically hey, I don't want you to sneeze on me, I don't want you to cough on me, you're wearing a mask.
so we're gonna require all of our employees to wear masks?
In an enclosed area, they can't maintain 6 feet apart. That's basically what organizations are doing out right now to try to enforce
Yeah, I
this
just think
OSHA requirement.
It's a mess.
It's not a win-win. I mean, right now, like you shared with, I think that from my perspective, I think that we need to at least be communicating to staff, the employees, what we're being forced to be reading and going through. I think communications to them is better than not sharing or waiting until January 7th and say, hey, here Friday, we're scrambling, they haven't made a decision, and now Monday on the 10th, we gotta enforce it.
Yeah.
So I think that would be my at least initial piece. I would think that it would be best that you move forward with the email to share with them where we're at, what we're dealing with.
And why we're asking
Why
for
we're
what we're
asking these
asking.
questions, and ideally, I hope that the Supreme Court pushes back and says, hey, we're not enforcing it. But at the same time, if they do come back in, I mean, I'm surprised that they did what they did already. So there's things that I can't control, we can't control that, but we have to be able to look at it. If it is a federal law, we have to look at how we're gonna enforce those things.
But do we also need to offer what happens to them if they choose not to comply by the rules, if those go in force? What are their options?
I mean, that's the first question I'd
They
have.
get paid time, they get sick time, they get,
If they get paid time for what?
if they choose not to comply by those rules and don't wanna come in, then what's their consequences?
Isn't it up to OSHA to enforce the
No.
rules?
I don't know that question.
OSHA would
You know.
fine us.
OSHA would tell us to enforce it.
That would be against, the fine would be against
So
us as the
normally
employer.
what, if they're not wanting to come in, I mean, all I think that we would have to look at is saying, hey, we're gonna be requesting, those to be enclosed areas to be wearing a mask. I mean, that's probably the only thing that I can look at it, and I think that would be the discussion that we would have of how would we be requesting that from staff to be doing that, if they're less than 6 feet apart together, working together. But again, the
So are-
items that we don't know yet until we.
Can
get
I
to it.
back up to Amy's question for just, so are you asking me that if somebody doesn't wanna tell us they're vaccinated and they refuse to come to work?
Well, if you send the letter out and we're basically saying this is what's gonna happen. Yes, if they choose to say, I don't wanna be vaccinated and I don't wanna wear a mask, then I mean, I'm not,
I guess from my
happen, then
perspective,
they just-
I guess from my perspective, if it's a federal law and they're refusing to do it, then that would be insubordination.
We don't
But
have
at
much
this
choice.
point,
Like-
it's not
like
a
any
federal
other
law, is it?
situation.
It's a OSHA ask, it hasn't made a federal.
Well, we
law.
won't, but we wouldn't make anybody wear a mask until it became, I mean, until
I'm just
at this
saying.
point, it is mandated.
Yeah,
At this point, the stay is no longer in place.
Right,
so it
right.
is
At this
moving
point, it
forward
is
to the
mandated.
10th of January and the 9th of February, unless something else happens, which is entirely possible that it will.
Right.
But the question is, do you wait on it and it be in a?
Well,
Or
that's why I think that it would be good that we look at what other organizations are doing it, because there's other companies that are having to enforce this. They're not waiting, they're already prepping and getting some of those steps, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Let's look at what some of they're doing, see how, if there's items that we can implement, obviously talk to the clinic or other places that are doing some of these, helping
That's why
with
we reached out to
businesses.
Amy, because we know that firm does a lot of work for governmental
Right.
entities in the state.
And-
And this is what they're recommending happen unless we get there, so that was.
And as a lawyer, I'm gonna recommend to my clients, do everything you can to comply with the strictest interpretation of everything. And that's the legal advice I always give them, because, but I guess what exactly is required under this? So we've got either you have to have people get vaccinated or they have to undergo this testing and masking regime.
Right, yep.
So January 10th, that requirement goes into place
Okay.
today.
So,
So barring the Supreme Court doing anything, but they don't have to have the testing in place until February something.
So at worst, we would say, January 10th, it could be that, okay, now everybody has to wear a mask and we're gonna get the testing figured out by
Either
February.
give us your vaccination status
Or
or wear a mask, or we could just say,
everybody has.
everybody wears a mask.
Well, and again, just to keep that, it's only if you're, hey, I gotta, get close to you, I'm gonna put on my mask. If I'm out by myself, I don't wear a mask. That's normally the
Well,
way
but for the-
businesses are doing them.
Yeah, how do you count the treasurer's office?
Well, yeah, we have a lot of offices that's
We
good.
They don't
can
have
sit
to
6
do it.
feet apart, but we walk by each other
Sure.
every.
So a lot of times what they do where I'm working, they just put their mask on, and once they get to where they're at, they take it off.
And then I'm
it's-
assuming we would put a sign on the door then for our customers to wear a mask.
Well,
Well, that's-
yeah, it's no different than
that
what we
I
were
have
doing
less
when we had
problem
first
with.
going into. And it's, if you think about when you go into a hospital, it's no different. They're wearing a mask when they get close to it. Most of them are just wearing them all the time.
I mean, hopefully no one's sick and dying here, but.
Again, these are all things that some of these other companies are doing just to try to keep in compliance with it. And I think if we say that we're looking at compliances, those are the items that we need to be looking at. How do we address it, just to your comments, in the strictest fashion? If they come back in and say, hey, we're not gonna require the enforcement of this until a review another 6 months, then we have an ability to step back. But I think that we need to be, working in that preparation, and if we don't have to do it, we don't have to, but I think that we should.
What is, how does OSHA require that we verify certification or vaccination status?
You provide proof, or you sign an affidavit that you don't have it, and if you can't do those things, or you take a religious or other medical disability type exception, you're deemed not to have had it.
Right.
So you have to, that was a question I had, do they have to show their
They could,
COVID card to you?
the employee record of immunization from a healthcare provider or pharmacy, a copy of the employee's COVID-19 vaccination record card, a copy of the employee's medical records documenting the vaccination, a copy of the employee's immunization records from a public health state or tribal immunization information system, a copy of any other official document that contains the type of vaccine administered, dates of administration, and the name of the healthcare professional or clinic sites administering the vaccine. If none of these records are available, the employee may fill out a form attesting to their vaccination status.
And how do they claim the exemption, like a religious or other exemption?
They simply don't tell me that they're vaccinated. I mean, and then
So they don't have to
Or
like
provide attestation.
physically
Yeah.
claim it, they can just not do it. Well, I say that my opinion would be that if on the 10th we decide that, or that it's clearly a federal law, then we tell employees now, but we say that, hey, it may be on the 10th, we're gonna ask you your vaccination status. And.
Well, you're gonna ask now, right?
That
So
was the intent,
You can
to start-
voluntarily share it
start
now.
gathering that information now, cause that's gonna take a bit of
That's
time.
gonna take a minute.
Some coordination for my office to get to
But I
potentially
just
get
wanna
those
make sure
records from
they
100
understand
or
that-
200 employees.
That it's voluntary, they don't have, if they don't want, if
That's
they
right.
choose
I
not
mean-
to, we're not gonna do anything at this point. They can tell us or not tell us.
The language in this communication clearly says that we're requesting employees to voluntarily disclose. And it goes on to talk about if they choose not to, then this may be what happens in the future.
I think one of the things that we had shared too was, making sure that we stay in either in HIPAA or, hey, there is no discrimination against somebody that chooses not to, we're not gonna be harassing anybody that chooses not to. I think those types of things were some of the language that we had written in
Part of the,
previously.
eventually, going forward at some point, you guys will need to adopt a policy. We have a draft policy that I thought I would bring back to you in a week. It sounds maybe now like you're not gonna wanna take action on that policy
No
until
reason for us not to look at it.
after the 10th.
Just thinking through this process a little bit, I'm very uncomfortable just sending a letter home. I would think that we might wanna think about getting all of our department heads or leaders and just sit down
Have
and
a conversation
go
with
a
them.
conversation with this so that they can tell people it's coming home, and not create panic that, we're being, this is really, we're being forced to do this.
Well,
And is it so crazy?
And timing wise, that may be a bit of a challenge, because I probably don't have some departments here until next week.
what about an email that requires them to have some sort of reply back? Can't you send an Outlook that says, some sort of approve, disapprove, or something that, that way they have to read it and they have to reply to it? And they
To,
can share, hey, no, or yes, here's my information.
are you talking about
Can do
the
a read receipt.
communication
Send the
to
communications.
all the employees?
Yeah,
Well,
My hands.
my intent was to send this to all, email this to all of our employees that have email addresses. However, we have some employees who don't have email addresses, and we probably have a lot of employees that aren't working this week.
Yeah.
And so they're not checking their emails. This is typically when a lot of
Well, we
people
wouldn't
take some
need this.
vacation.
Was it
yeah,
so
but you're
crazy?
saying January 10th.
If here's what's going if January 10th comes and goes without this being fully in place, Uncle Sam's not jumping on our butt, on January 11th, because the entire country's in this state, and the administration's vacillation on this point has led me to conclude that it doesn't have the will to enforce these in the draconian manner that I think we're fearing. Admittedly, that's a risk, a calculated one, but I'd like to consult the department heads how they think it might be best implemented. And maybe that's a crazy idea, maybe that creates a whole lot of problems, but we got 235 or so people. Rather than just handing down a mandate from on high, which obviously has its own issues, does it make sense to bring the department heads in and say, hey, just give us any input on how you think we could make this smooth, or ask the same question. I know we're ultimately responsible for the decision, and I know you've got a short timeline, and that's giving you heartburn. I'm here. I don't think the timeline is as short as we think it is.
Well, it's, the dates floated 2 or 3 times, right, so.
I mean, yeah. So it comes and goes, and then it's gonna be like,
I mean, our biggest,
like
what
comparing
Keith's
accounts
got,
3 to 4 times.
Keith and the sheriff probably have the biggest number of employees by far, right?
Sheriff, easily, and then Keith.
And I'm gonna guess both of those, maybe I'm bigoted, I would guess both of those areas are probably, I would anticipate they're gonna have challenges with this. Probably more so than other areas, just be my guess.
Do we want a bunch of snowplow operators walking away in January?
I don't think so.
I'm more afraid of yeah, doing right by, or not doing right by our own people, than making sure we've got Washington all happy.
I think we need to at least still email the communications.
Well,
That's my thoughts on that.
email away. I mean, email away telling people what the government wants to do.
I'm sure a lot of people already know what's coming down the pike, what they're working
I
on,
have no
but-
idea how much our employees have paid
I knew
attention.
nothing about it.
You did?
I hadn't heard.
Are you living under a rock?
I know, I don't know if it's news, it's depressing.
No, yeah, I think if you haven't, if your universe does not include people that work for large employers, people that have been that 100+, you probably haven't stayed as abreast of it as others, because it's certainly been out there and it's been causing significant angst.
Yes, that, I mean, I don't disagree sending an email telling people what's coming down the pike, but, make clear that we don't know what's gonna happen.
But you're suggesting we not request vaccination information at this time?
I'm worried about the precedent it sets. You have that information, that cat is out of the bag. Can I live with it? Possibly, but I think I don't like it. So,
Okay, so this is a direction from all of us, or a consensus of what form, or what do we
Yeah,
want to
I
share
need-
with that, so we can
You
be
need
clear
the
with Nancy?
consensus.
I need the board to give me a consensus about, do I send out the communication, and do I ask for, at this point, I think, right, that whether I'm sending out a communication at all, and does that communication include requesting vaccination information?
my preference would be to tell them, send out the communication and tell them we may in the future be requesting vaccination status as required by federal law, as may be required by federal law.
Yeah, I don't know if you could, I would communicate what we know about the current directive. You could send a letter out and you could say, if this carries through, by January 10th, we will need to know that, or we'll assume we're non-vaccinated. And if you want to voluntarily share before there, great, if not,
Look, back
I
up,
don't
just so I'm clear what you said. You said if this goes through by January 10th, we need to know.
yeah,
Well, we won't know if it goes through till January 7th, which is a Friday.
7th,
And Monday
And
is,
effective
10th.
January 10th, we may be required to.
provide.
To
okay, so
inquire
ask
this
for it,
status.
okay.
You're asking for it kind of on a voluntary basis, which I think is the prudent thing to do. Not that I agree with it, I don't agree with it at all, but I think we have to be conservative and safe for the taxpayer. And I think we ask, and if people want to share, then they can go ahead, and if they don't, then I don't have a problem with it at all, them not sharing it. And we just assume that it's a non-vaccinated,
Right.
and then I say we wait and see what the Supreme Court says, and if they say we have to go through these more draconian rules, then we have a discussion on how we do that. And Santos, I think, brought up some good common sense ideas of how you could do that and not even ask the status, just say, okay, we're just gonna mask.
Right.
Well, but we still have to ask status in terms of testing.
But if you mask, do you?
Yes.
So even the mask doesn't satisfy the
So,
requirement.
I'm not at all happy with that.
it's just, that was what some of these organizations are doing, especially when you see the numbers still going up. That's all that they're trying to do, but.
All right, so
I-
Nathan is communication without asking vaccination status.
I can live with what Jeff said.
I like
Jeff is
the way
communication
the way Jeff worded it and saying, hey, we want to communicate, this is where we're at. After the Supreme Court hearing, we're gonna be needing to follow up with this information. If you wanna share with us now, that's fine, but we're not enforcing that until after the Supreme Court date.
If and when.
And I like that wording, because then in a sense, it shares where we're at, and that's really where
Well,
we're
and
at.
we're not even gonna enforce, based on the way the law reads, we don't even enforce it. We don't enforce it in terms of requiring them to tell us. We only enforce, if somebody chooses not to tell us, that's fine, but then we're gonna assume they're not vaccinated unless they tell us otherwise.
So how is OSHA planning on auditing our record of obtaining compliance verification?
I'm,
Have you asked for it?
I'm assuming they'll ask for, I'm required to get that documentation and keep a roster of who's vaccinated and who's not. I'm assuming they'll come in and audit that.
I mean, we could be asked by a variety of sources.
Every
Honestly,
employer in the country has to
besides the
report
government.
on vaccination status to OSHA. Bullshit.
Well,
Pardon my French.
I can pretty much tell you there's organizations already doing it though.
Well, fine, if they wanna do it, I'm not part of that.
So I think that's what I'd like to.
All right,
go to that
so
path.
you're, what about you two? What Jeff said?
Yeah, is there gonna be a date that we can put in this correspondence that would state, you're looking for volunteer information at this point, but there's not a day down there that we would actually have to know by, as of yet, am I correct?
Just tell them the enforcement date is the 10th.
As of today, we would need to know by the 10th.
By the 10th.
We would,
Assuming that.
assuming that
That's the
Supreme
7th.
Court does not permanently ban this
I think,
move.
I think that information
Yeah.
needs to be the tag end of that.
Yeah, I agree.
And if we do that, I'm all in with Jeff's position.
Yeah.
Okay,
And I
don't
think,
like
I
it.
think to Nathan's point, I don't think that they're gonna enforce it that quick, but I don't know. I was surprised that they changed it already with what we had already done, so.
And then to Amy's point, the question about, you know, cost of tests, that time, you know, we'll address that when we know it's a real thing.
right.
You know, I'm just hopeful that it gets struck down at this point, we don't have to deal with it. But we may have to.
Yeah. I agree. And I think it's not fair when you know that that's not something that we need to have, and I hope that Supreme Court can see that, but it's
Couldn't we
extremely a challenge
contract
for
the
us.
testing portion to somebody like public health?
Well, we're certainly not gonna do the test ourselves.
But I
I'm
mean,
not
even the
testing-
record keeping and the results keeping and all that.
That's what I said, it would be full.
No, I don't think that would meet our OSHA requirement, because we need to have that, if OSHA would test our compliance, they would, as the employer, they would look to us to have that information.
Great misgivings about that.
Yeah, this is, like I said, this, you know, my fear is for the long-term survivability of OSHA, because you've politicized it.
Yep.
You could undermine all the authority and credibility that organization has.
Well, that's-
long-term.
That's a-
Such as it
What
is.
little is left.
Yep, that's a completely different topic here. So moving on and staying on
Sorry,
topic.
was that out loud?
Okay, so
Alright,
you
so-
got.
So I have my
So, yeah,
direction for now,
direction,
yep.
okay. Moving on to item number 12, receive information from county employees. Is there any county employees that would like to comment on anything?
You remind me with your correspondence that probably you got an email or something from Cleaner Muscatine. I got one a week or so ago, expressing interest in addressing the zoning commission on how to develop proper ordinances for, solar energy, and expressing that cities and counties have been misled as far as, whether we had enough farm ground, in existence. I informed them that we've already adopted our ordinance and that
They're
our
looking
county
at it,
had a
right?
recent ordinance, and they were very pleased with it, so.
Good, good, okay, all right,
I have one other thing.
okay.
I just wanted to make sure as you look at the claims that are coming through, that you continue to keep your eye on those that are charged to the county attorney's office that relate particularly to the service of paperwork by the Muscatine County Sheriff, which has not heretofore been paid out of the county attorney's budget like it has been for any other service that our office has had done in a year. So there's about a $40,000 budget item that since I've been here, we've not come anywhere close to using. But you know, those fees are fairly substantial, and I just want you to be keeping an eye on them. I don't want this to sneak up, particularly next year with a budget amendment, because the numbers have exceeded what we expected. We've put in another 40,000 for this year, but if that goes up to 5,000-6,000 a month, you know what that's going to do, obviously, to the budget numbers. And it's not a criticism; it's just to keep a heads up, because it's one of those things that when suddenly it happens, everybody says, well, I didn't know, and I'm just trying to remind you that it's a, you know, this last 2 weeks was $2,800.
Okay.
You know, before that, mine was another couple grand. Well, if it's 5,000 a month, that's 60,000, and you know, as we try to work our way out of COVID, you know, that with the case, you know, we're just serving a lot of papers that really aren't of any value because we serve for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cases on a given day, and only one can go. And that's the dilemma that we're in, but we don't have a lot of choice. I just want the board to be aware of it in case you get questions or anybody wonders why suddenly this number's out of whack.
Has anybody, Jim, this may be off, I don't know if it's related or not related. At a point back, the sheriff's office had told us about, so I see the Polk County Sheriff is serving a lot of papers in Muscatine County. Has that been changed in legislation that allowed them to do that?
Oh, no, they're just,
grab?
yeah, I mean, it would have to be changed to, you know, somebody's found a niche and they're doing it for cheaper, and that's the gig, and they're doing it everywhere.
Yeah. Okay.
So we use the Muscatine County Sheriff, or Cedar County, or Scott County, or, you know, Des Moines, or whatever county it is, that's who we use, but, you know, that,
I'd like to follow that money trail and see where it's going.
Okay.
I don't know if you knew that, but I mean, somehow someone in Polk County's taking a lot of the service fees that used to go to the local sheriffs are all coming out of Polk County now somewhere, under the badge of the sheriff's office. So that's a money grab by Polk County. And I don't know, maybe we need to talk to our legislators and figure out what's going on there and why that's allowed to happen. Because I like our local law enforcement serving papers to our local residents, because then they can keep an eye, because generally speaking, it's a similar population.
Yep.
And we like to keep an eye on
Completely agree.
I gotta go.
them. Okay,
All right.
thank you, Jim.
Good luck.
All right, any other county employees?
I did have a couple of, I'll keep them short. 2 things that are coming down the pike for us, Department of Revenue for next year. Tax season has rolled out a new, used to be called the elderly credit, for 65 and older or permanently disabled. And now they're coming out, and we've only had one webinar training with just senior staff, so, and they got more questions than they had answers, so they're going back and going through it again. But basically what it's doing is the state of Iowa is now gonna put in a threshold for freezing taxes for people that are over 70, which there's been a lot of talk about that. So they're still gonna have the same credit if you're 65 and older or permanently disabled, but now there's gonna be another question that if you're 70 or older, they want you to put in what your taxes are this year, what your income is this year, and everyone has to file it to be able to start the threshold this year, and they have to file it every year. They may not get the credit the first year, but then the second year, it may freeze their taxes at what they were last year.
So if I identify as someone who's 70 or older, how do I go about applying for that?
Well, we're gonna have to do a lot of educating and work with, we've done it in the past. They've held that senior health fair, and we've had we had a couple personnel go to it to talk to people. We work with senior resources. We can work through with community services to let it be known. There still will be a cap on income, but all of that can change because now they're gonna take in how many people are in the household. I mean, it gets really complicated, but if a husband and wife that are over 70 fill out the form the first year, and the next year one of them is deceased, they could definitely qualify. But if they didn't fill it out, then they gotta start next year filling it out to, get the base year put in there.
So, and this only applies to income tax?
Property tax.
Also,
Property
Des
tax
Moines
based on,
wants to limit
Income.
taxes by telling us what we can do and not limiting itself. That's a new.
yeah. Well, the application used to be 1 page, it's now 3 pages. And like I said, it was completely confusing. We had our first webinar, and it's something that it will roll out on the new tax year starting in July. It'll be based on the 2021 income. So we're gonna have to have more training, but it is something, cause I know other states, and we get a lot of questions, other states have, after a certain point, you don't pay taxes, or the taxes are limited to a certain amount, so I am in favor that Iowa's doing something for the elderly, low income, but it's still a question. And who goes out and proves this, that you have your household income is this, if they still have children that live with them.
And people who hold stuff in a trust or in an LLC,
Yeah.
what the heck are we doing there?
It gets very complicated, and we end up, we're gonna have to make appointments with some people to get these forms filled out.
Okay, so,
But-
and Des Moines granting us money to pay for staff time for that, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure. But that, and like I said, we'll have more about it, but I just wanted to let you know that you might hear some things about that, in which we have more questions and answers. And the other thing that the the Iowa Department of Transportation is saying, that it was supposed to go into effect January 1st. They passed this contiguous titling that can be done in counties that are connected to us. So we would have Scott, Johnson, Louisa, and Cedar that are a touching boundary to Muscatine. And this will allow any dealer or resident from those counties to come to any of these contiguous counties to get title work done on a new vehicle, new or used vehicle purchase. I foresee this becoming a problem for us only because Scott County is closed for appointment only still to this day, and they think that's the way they're gonna stay. So we constantly get customers calling that say, are you open, can we come in now? And of course, right now you have to be a resident of Muscatine to title in Muscatine. And you can only guess that if they open it up to your titling a new or used vehicle, that eventually it's gonna be everything.
What kind of information sharing systems do we have in place with other counties? Is it a
Well,
statewide registry?
it's a statewide, yeah, we're using the state system. But the problem is, when somebody titles a record in our county, we scan it, we keep all the documentation, that's not shared.
Yeah.
So then if they want a replacement title, and they're gonna get plates that say Muscatine County, but they're gonna be from Scott County. And they're gonna have to sign off, there again, they've gone from a front and back page application to a 3-page application, cause they have to sign off that they're gonna receive plates that say Muscatine County, they realize that, they're gonna have.
Are we allowed to charge any additional fees for that?
That was the other question, and there are some counties that are challenging that, and they're just gonna put that fee in, but at this point, no. We will get the whopping $2.50 that we get for issuing a title that comes to Muscatine County. The use tax goes right to the Department of Revenue, so we don't get any part of
Set
that.
for appointment only for non-county residents, is that something that's allowable? Let me ask a different.
Can we not
Does it
accept
say it, we can't do that?
No.
Alright.
And so that's something, they've already run into problems with the computer system, so they've already backed it up from January 1st to February 1st. So, again, but it is something that all the counties have fought, but it's something that the DOT kind of got into a bind with the Auto Dealers Association that said they've gone to this electronic titling, they didn't meet the deadline on that, and since they didn't meet the deadline on this, they're required to now do this continuous title, which we do a good job. We have a great relationships with our dealers and even some of the out-of-town dealers, which is gonna do nothing but hurt us because they're gonna say, hey, those girls in Muscatine County know how to do this and get it done in a timely manner, so let's just send them all there.
So how would we implement the extra $25 whatever fee we could throw in there to make that,
At this
advantageous
point-
for your staff?
The Treasurers Association has had a fee bill into legislature every year to change the fees. They haven't increased the fee on driver's license, they haven't increased the fees on title transfers, on anything for 40 years, and it never gets.
So we can't do it
Push
on our
through.
own?
It
No.
might not
Legally?
go up.
Not legally, you know,
I'm
it's
thinking like
another
me
one.
now, Sam.
No,
Right.
I'm just asking, cause I think it's a challenge for
It
us.
is, and it's just gonna make our residents wait longer. It's causing a problem in a lot of other counties that are smaller and they're located next to a larger county, because now their county, Jones County, for example, is getting all Lynn County business there for driver's license, because they can go get a test for a driver's license in Jones County that has one stoplight versus go to Lynn County where, you know, they're in heavy traffic and whatnot. So their county treasurers had to add staff. So basically, Jones County is paying for Lynn's County's, you know, and this is gonna become that same type of problem. But I just wanted to share that good
Okay.
news with you.
Well,
And-
keep us updated on what they
Yeah,
do, I think
it did get delayed, and I was happy to see that, because they don't have all the
From the
quirks worked
government,
out,
I'm here to help.
so, thank you.
Alright, thank you. Alright, any other county employees? Okay, hearing none, anything from the public? Alright, anything else from the board? I think, Nancy, I only had one request. When you, if possible, could you send us the budget schedules that you have for the meetings that we're gonna have in
Yes.
January to us, and then, I don't have anything else. If nothing else, it is 11:01. Meeting adjourned.